Shalom and good day all. This is Tehillim29 back again for another graphic novels I have recently read through. And starting off, let's have a bit of a look through the list of things of what I have here that I have read through. First things first, we can see that we've got the future state related stuff. And I will say one thing when I do get around to it. You'll know where I stand with it because of reviewing the comics of it on the channel. Then we have Young Justice, absolutely worth reading through. We had Boy 1, Revolver by Matt Kindt, The Batman Black and White, Superman Red and Blue, Urban Legends, The Mighty by Peter J. Tomasi, which I really quite enjoyed. It was very interesting. But I'll get around to it when I get around to covering the review as well as cover and rating, or the story, art and rating. And last but not least, returning to something is killing the children, Volume 1. So, jumping into first things first, let's get into the future state. Now, this is the future state Superman collected trade, and for this, to those who followed my reviews of the Fool's Gold of the future state, I still stand by the rating I stand by for it. So moving into the next one across, and that is the DC Comics Young Justice, the next volume in the series. And yes, this is like the good Young Justice. Like if you want to read something out of if you want to read something instead of Brian Michael Bendis, I advise you pick up this series. This is 10 times better, 10 times more exciting. You get more for your buck. And I highly recommend it. For this series, a 9.5 out of 10. And that applies for the stories and the art as well. Boy 1. Now, this was an interesting story because it deals with a little bit of conspiracy. Not a lot, but a little bit. But it also deals with things around a certain character that's in the story and also some people that he knows. Just to give a brief synopsis, but the story does somewhat continue. About the only thing that's sort of missing in relation to this story is a volume 2, just to see where the story continues after volume 1 or after this volume. So for this, probably a 7.5 out of 10, and that applies to the story as well. Matt Kindt, Revolver. Now, one thing I'm going to have to do is get a hold of some more of the Matt Kindt titles. And I noticed recently that my LCS also has Matt Kindt's Department H. So I'm going to have to try to get a hold of the omnibuses in relation to Department H. But for Revolver, I give it an 8 out of 10. It was quite an interesting story. There's a lot of mystery to it, as well as conspiracy, and it sort of feels like it's connected to sort of like the whole Matt Kindt universe of stories. Yeah, it might be through a different publisher, but the story feels like it connects to his other works. That's how well his writing is. Moving into the next two future state related stuff, again, I stick by my Fool's Gold ratings for both of these, which connect to the Justice League and also the Suicide Squad. But moving into the Batman Black and White, it was really nice to reread through this again, even though it's in trade paperback form. And Yes, it is done in black and white, but apart from that, you do get quite an anthology of stories. Some good, some bad. Overall rating, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. In the Batman black and white one, I really loved reading the Jorge Jimenez story around Damian Wayne and Batman. Definitely worth coming back for the reread. Then we have the Superman red and blue. Um, of course, it starts off with the terrible John Ridley story at the beginning, but as you go throughout the rest of the book, you do actually get some enjoyable stories apart from his. Um, if I were to give that a rating overall, maybe a 7.5 out of 10. But it would have been nice to see Jorge Jimenez do a written story in that as well. Moving into the Urban Legends, Volume 2, to which we also have the introduction of the terrible Megan Fitzmartin, who couldn't write her way out of a paper bag, to which gave us the introduction of a terribly written Tim Drake. Yeah, it's the only way to put it. As harsh as it sounds, it's the truth, and I'm not going to tell a lie on the channel in regards to her writing, and I don't intend to. Apart from that, there were some better stories written in this that I did actually enjoy. We had some Chip Zdarsky. We also had another writer there writing us somewhat better, and I think it was Brandon Eastman, I think it was, who seemed to write a 10 times better story on Tim Drake's character than what Megan Fitzmartin did. And I would highly recommend only picking up this volume 2 for that. When I've got the time, I'm going to have to work on picking up the next collected volumes in relation to this series. Now, I just forgot one thing. My rating for it. For the overall rating, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move on to the Mighty. Now I'm going to skip the Mighty because I want to come back to that last because I've got quite a bit to say about it. Not bad, actually. Not bad, but interesting of what I've got to share about it. Now, returning to Something Is Killing the Children by James Tynion, rereading through this once again was really quite interesting, and it was like good following Erica Slaughter's investigations, and like this is before everything moves into volume 2 or the next lot of the arc. And it's interesting to see that there's a group of characters that go out of their way to basically kill monsters, that monsters kill certain groups of people or certain children, for example, and that's why it's called Something Is Killing the Children, and they go after those monsters. After reading through this once again, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now, moving into, last but not least, The Mighty. Oh my goodness, this was actually quite interesting. As this story sort of begins, you start to learn that there's sort of like a bit of a past dealing with a certain group that came to Earth, and it's sort of like this group has sort of like dwindled in its numbers, and they're sort of like left with one somewhat superhero left, and the way that this superhero is around, he's not a perfect superhero in any way, because you learn that he's doing some scientific research, and with that, with one of the scenes, it almost reminds me like a superhero with Cadmus Labs. It's the only way to put it. And this character almost feels like a bit of a Lex Luthor if he had superpowers. It's the only way that I can bring it across. But you do get a bit of a hint that there was meant to be a somewhat better volume 3, exploring more into the past in relation to these superhero type characters. And yeah, this superhero ain't a perfect superhero, but they want to do the right thing, but in trying to do the right thing, they also get scorned. So, in that, you can sort of see a bit of a Batman, Spider Man esque side of things in relation to the character, to where Batman also to where Spider Man gets scorned um, oh, by the Daily Bugle. And for the overall story rating, as original as this story is, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. And definitely check it out, if you enjoy Peter J. Tomasi, because I know I do. And I love a lot of his Super Sons stories, and I'd love to see more of them. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.